It was 1 a.m. in the glass and steel canyon of the downtown financial district, where skyscrapers loomed like silent tombstones against the bruised, rain-heavy sky. Ethan Hayes blinked hard, scrubbing the grit from his bloodshot eyes with the heel of his hand as he guided his dented, paint-chipped Volkswagen Polo out of the underground parking garage. The wipers slapped a dull, monotonous arc across the windshield, smearing the neon glow of streetlights and office tower signs into bleeding watercolor streaks. A crackly 1990s love ballad droned from the tinny radio, slightly off-key, fraying at the edges, just like his last nerve. His lower back throbbed with a dull, persistent ache from 14 hours hunched over his desk. He'd chugged 3 energy drinks and eaten nothing but a sad, crumbly turkey sandwich from the vending machine since noon, and even then he'd barely scraped together the first draft of the Southside Industrial Park report before the midnight deadline. Some days he wondered what he was still doing there. 3 years in the project development department, and he was still the guy who got handed all the grunt work, the guy whose name no one could remember until something went wrong and they needed a scapegoat. He'd watched less competent colleagues climb the ladder on charm and stolen ideas while he stayed buried under spreadsheets, and he'd told himself 100 times that hard work would pay off. Lately, though, that faith was wearing thin. He braked at a red light on the empty crosswalk, his head throbbing in time with the wipers. His headlights swept across the sidewalk under the 24-hour convenience store awning, and for a split second he thought sleep deprivation and caffeine overload had finally broken his brain. There she was. Lila Voss. 3 months ago, she'd been the youngest investment director in the entire Sterling Group conglomerate, his ruthless, razor-sharp, terrifyingly brilliant boss. The woman who'd torn his work apart so thoroughly he'd gone home and stared at his resume until 3 a.m. wondering if he even belonged in finance at all. He could still hear the echo of her voice in the glass-walled quarterly review room, the sharp snap of her leather binder hitting the table as she flung his due diligence report down in front of 12 senior managers. Ethan Hayes. Is this a fairy tale you've submitted? She leaned forward across the table, dark eyes sharp as shards of obsidian, and the whole room had gone dead quiet. Full of holes. Assumptions stacked on assumptions. Utterly unworkable. If you can't do basic due diligence, get out of my department. He'd left that meeting with his ears burning and his pride in tatters, the crumpled report clutched in his fist. He'd stayed up 3 straight nights reworking every single page, cross-checking every data point, rebuilding every financial model from scratch. He'd slid the revised report under her office door at 4 a.m., and she'd never acknowledged it. Not a note. Not an email. Nothing. 2 days later, the company-wide email had hit every inbox. Lila Voss had resigned for personal reasons, effective immediately. She'd vanished without a trace. No goodbye drinks. No LinkedIn update. No forwarding contact. The office gossip mill had churned for weeks. People said she'd had a nervous breakdown. People said she'd run off with a hedge fund client. People said she'd embezzled money and fled the country. Nobody knew the truth. Nobody had expected to ever see her again. And now here she was, barefoot on the wet concrete under the store awning, her expensive ivory silk blouse soaked through and clinging to the lines of her body. She clutched a half-empty bottle of single malt scotch in one hand, her gaze hollow and distant, like a well that had run dry years ago. Rain plastered dark strands of hair to her pale face, and she didn't brush them away. She didn't seem to notice the cold, didn't seem to notice the rain at all. She just stared out at the empty street, like she was waiting for something that would never come. Like she had nowhere else in the world to go. Ethan's chest tightened, a strange, twisting mix of old resentment, startled shock, and something softer he didn't want to name. Some stupid, reckless, soft-hearted impulse took over before he could talk himself out of it. He'd spent 3 years being afraid of her, resenting her a little, even. But seeing her like this? Broken. Alone. It felt wrong to just drive away. It felt inhuman. He flicked on his turn signal and pulled over to the curb, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. He rolled down the passenger window, and the sharp, metallic smell of rain mixed with the sharp, smoky burn of good scotch drifted in, thick and heady. "Miss Voss," he called out, his voice rougher than he intended, rusty from disuse after a long day of silent spreadsheets. She turned slowly, as if moving through water. The puffy purple bags under her eyes and the gaunt, exhausted set of her jaw aged her by at least 5 years. Recognition flickered in her eyes, dull and slow, then twisted into a bitter, wobbly smile that looked more like a grimace. "Ethan Hayes. Come to gawk at the fallen queen? Get a good long look. This is what happens when you stop playing the game nice." "Get in," he said, pushing the passenger door open and holding up his crummy branded umbrella, the one with a pizza delivery logo printed all over it, free with a $20 order. It was the only umbrella he owned. "It's pouring. You'll get hypothermia out there." She didn't move. She tilted her head back and took a long, unflinching swallow of scotch, letting cold rain run down her neck and under the collar of her shirt. The fabric was already translucent, stuck to her collarbones. "Don't waste your pity on me. I've got nowhere to go. No house. No hotel room. Not a dollar to my name. Nothing." "I know," he said, blunt and awkward, the way he always was around her. He'd never been good at soft words or gentle comfort. "But I can't leave my old boss sleeping on a sidewalk. Bad for my career mental health, you know? I'd have recurring nightmares about performance reviews." For a second, she just stared at him, like she couldn't tell if he was joking or not. Like she'd forgotten what it sounded like when someone talked to her like a person instead of a title. Then she huffed a short, breathless laugh that turned into a ragged, chest-deep cough. She stumbled toward the car, her bare feet splashing in cold puddles, and slid into the passenger seat. The worn vinyl upholstery squelched under her wet clothes, leaving dark, spreading splotches. She smelled like rain and expensive whiskey and something faint and floral, like jasmine soap under it all. The scent hit him like a memory. Her office had always smelled like that, sharp and clean and just out of reach. The car fell quiet, save for the low hum of the heater blowing warm air and the steady drumming of rain on the roof. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his palms suddenly sweaty. He'd spent years avoiding being alone with her. Now here she was, broken and quiet in his front seat, and he had no idea what to say. "Where to?" he asked, keeping his eyes fixed on the rain-slicked road. "Anywhere," she murmured, closing her eyes. Droplets of water still clung to her long dark lashes, catching the glow of the dashboard lights like tiny diamonds. "Just not a hospital. And not a police station. Pick wherever." "I don't care." Ethan hesitated for half a second, then pulled back into traffic, heading toward his tiny studio apartment in the older, quieter part of town. It wasn't much. It was cheap. It was drafty. But it was warm, and it was dry, and it was the only place he had. She curled up in the passenger seat, her knees drawn up to her chest, her bare feet tucked under her, looking fragile as a wounded heron. She didn't speak the whole drive, and he didn't push. He kept the radio low, the wipers slapping back and forth, and tried not to glance over at her too often. When he finally pulled into the potholed parking lot of his 3-story walk-up apartment building, she opened her eyes and stared out at the peeling beige paint and cracked concrete walkways. "You live here?" There was no sneer in her voice, just quiet surprise, like she'd forgotten people actually lived in places like this. Like her entire world had been penthouses and 5-star hotels for so long she'd forgotten regular apartments existed. "Where else?" he said, trying for lightness and missing by a mile. "If you wanted the Grand Hyatt, I'd have to pawn that scotch first. And I'm pretty sure it's half gone already. Probably wouldn't cover one night." She didn't answer. She just followed him up the 6 flights of creaky stairs, no elevator, of course. The stairwell smelled like old carpet and lemon disinfectant, and the motion sensor lights flickered on and off as they climbed. Somewhere down the hall, a TV blared a late-night talk show. His studio apartment was small, barely 500 square feet, just big enough for a pull-out couch, a rickety dining table, and a bed pushed up against the far wall. But he kept it neat. He'd always been tidy. He handed her a thick, faded bath towel, then dug out a brand-new gray t-shirt and a pair of plain black sweatpants from the back of his dresser, still in their plastic packaging. He'd bought them for a gym membership he'd never actually used. Shower. Change, he said, jerking his thumb toward the tiny bathroom where the tile was cracked around the tub. Don't catch a cold. I can't afford the hospital bill. My insurance is garbage. High deductible, no copay. She took the clothes, pausing in the bathroom doorway with her back to him. Her hair dripped water onto the linoleum floor. Her voice was so low he almost didn't hear it over the hum of the fridge. Thank you, Ethan. Really. You didn't have to do this. The old water heater rumbled to life, loud and clunky in the small space. Ethan wandered into the kitchen, his mind still reeling. This was insane. He was insane. He'd just picked up his estranged ex-boss off the street, brought her home, and now she was showering in his bathroom. Any normal person would have called her a cab. Any normal person would have driven her to a shelter. But he wasn't normal, apparently. He grabbed the last 2 eggs from the fridge and a handful of dried egg noodles from the pantry and set about making the simplest noodle soup he knew how. It was the same thing his mom used to make when he was sick as a kid. He chopped a handful of green onions and tossed them into the boiling broth, and the warm, savory scent slowly filled the apartment, chasing away the chill of rain and whiskey. It was nothing fancy. It was nothing impressive. But it was hot, and it was food, and it was the best he could do. When she stepped out of the bathroom, the oversized t-shirt swallowed her thin frame, the sleeves falling past her wrists, making her look smaller than he'd ever seen her. She stopped short when she saw the bowl of soup on the table, just staring at the curl of steam rising from it, like she couldn't remember the last time someone had made her something to eat. Like she'd been living on nothing but scotch and regret for months. Sit, he said, pulling out the rickety folding chair across from her. It's all I've got. Sorry it's not room service. No truffles or anything. She picked up her chopsticks, her fingers still a little pink from the hot shower, twirled a few noodles, blew on them gently, and took a bite. And then a tear splashed into the broth. Then another. Then another. She clapped a hand over her mouth, her shoulders shaking violently, but she made no sound, like she'd spent years training herself not to cry out loud. Like crying was a weakness she couldn't afford to show, even now, even when no one was watching but the guy whose reports she used to tear apart. Ethan froze, completely out of his depth. He'd never been good at comforting people. He fumbled for a crumpled napkin from the takeout drawer and held it out to her, his own face heating up with awkwardness. Too salty? I'll use less soy sauce next time. I kind of eyeballed it. Sorry. She took the napkin and scrubbed at her eyes hard, like she was angry at herself for crying. When she looked up, her eyes were red and raw, and there was something shattered in them he'd never seen before. Not the sharp, untouchable director from The Office. Not the woman who'd made grown men stutter in boardrooms. Just a woman who'd lost everything. Ethan, she said, her voice rough and thick with held-back tears. What if we got married? His chopsticks clattered to the linoleum floor, the sharp crack echoing in the tiny room. He blinked, convinced the 80-hour workweeks had finally broken his brain. He must have misheard her. There was no way she'd just said what he thought she'd said. I'm sorry? What did you just say? Married, she repeated, calm as could be, like she was proposing a business deal instead of a lifetime commitment. She picked up her bowl and took a slow sip of broth, like she hadn't just been sobbing 2 minutes ago, like her eyes weren't still red and puffy. A marriage of convenience. Paper only. I need a husband. And you? You need a break. A real one. Not another, good job, keep trying from Locke. He bent to pick up the chopsticks, his ears ringing. The cold linoleum pressed into his bare knees. Ms. Voss, you're still drunk. It's me. Ethan. The guy who writes fairy tales for due diligence reports. The guy you yelled at every other week for 3 years. That's exactly why I'm asking you. She set the bowl down, her gaze sharp and steady, the same look she'd worn in boardrooms when she was about to close a multi-million-dollar deal. It was strange, seeing that fire flicker back to life under all the exhaustion. Ethan, you're honest. Stubborn as hell, but you've got a line you won't cross. I tore you apart in front of the whole team, and you never badmouthed me behind my back. When VP Locke stole credit for your West Side retail project last month, you knew the whole story, and you never ran to HR to snitch. I've been wandering around this neighborhood for an hour tonight. Dozens of cars drove by. Nice cars. Expensive cars. You're the only one who stopped. She leaned forward slightly, her elbows on the table, and her voice softened, just a little. You can probably guess what happened to me. I need a marriage license. To get my family off my back and to keep my creditors at bay. Legally, a spouse changes everything. In exchange, I'll be your personal career coach. 3 months. I'll get you solid footing in the project department. You'll have an A rating on your year-end review. You'll stop being the guy everyone dumps on. You'll get the promotion you've earned. Deal? It all sounded too logical, too planned out to be drunk talk. Ethan sat there for a long minute, turning it over in his head. This was insane. This was the stupidest thing he'd ever considered. Marry his ex-boss? A woman he barely knew, outside of her yelling at him? It sounded like a bad rom-com plot. The kind of thing he'd make fun of if his friends told him about it. But then he thought about Cole Bennett and the way he took credit for everyone's work and laughed about it afterward. He thought about VP Locke, who never even remembered his name until something went wrong. He thought about 3 years of grinding away and getting nowhere, of watching less talented people pass him by. And he looked at Lila, sitting across from him in his old t-shirt, sharp and broken and brilliant all at once. "What happened to you?" he asked finally. "Really? Why are you here?" "On my couch. In my sweatpants." The cold settled back over her face, like frost on a window pane. Her jaw tightened. "My ex-husband. Gideon Cross. I built Cloud Tech Innovations with him. Took it public. Worked 18-hour days for 7 years. And while I was pregnant, while I was in the hospital on bed rest with complications, he transferred all my shares out from under me. Stacked the board with his people and pushed me out. Lost the baby 2 weeks later. Now he's off celebrating his fancy new wedding, and he's frozen every single account I have. Every dollar. Every investment. Everything." Ethan sucked in a breath. He'd heard rumors about the Cross Corp scandal, of course. Everyone in finance had. The golden couple torn apart by betrayal. The wife pushed out in the most brutal way possible. He just never imagined the woman at the center of it had been his boss. He'd had no idea. "How would marrying me fix any of that?" he asked, quiet. "I'm nobody. I can't fight Gideon Cross." "First," she said, ticking it off on her fingers, "my grandmother left me her old house. The will says if I'm not married by my 30th birthday next month, Gideon gets legal control of it. It's the only thing I have left that's mine. The only thing he doesn't know about. Second, I need spousal standing to file for a formal investigation into his asset transfers. He hid everything too well for me to touch alone. A legal spouse can subpoena records I can't. And third," she paused, her voice softening just a fraction, and she looked away, like it was hard to say out loud. "I need someone I don't have to watch my back around. Someone who isn't on his payroll. Someone I can trust, even a little." Ethan looked at her. This woman who'd once intimidated the hell out of him, who'd made him stay up 3 nights in a row redoing reports, who'd walked through boardrooms like she owned the place. Right now, she looked like glass, like one wrong move and she'd shatter into 1,000 pieces. Some stupid, soft part of him caved. "Deal." He held up a hand before she could speak, before she could change his mind. "But 3 conditions. 1. No actual spousal duties. Separate rooms, separate lives. No expectations. No physical stuff. 2. We don't interfere with each other's friends or dating or whatever. Private lives stay private. 3. The second this is all over, we get a divorce. No strings, no hard feelings, no alimony. Clean break. We go back to our lives." Lila stared at him for a long, unreadable moment, then held out her hand. Her fingers were ice cold, but her grip was firm, the same firm handshake she'd given every new hire on their first day. "Deal, Mr. Hayes. Welcome to the partnership." That night, he slept on the lumpy pull-out couch, and she took the bed. At 3 in the morning, he heard her coughing in the bedroom, quiet and ragged, followed by the soft click of a lighter. She was smoking in there. He didn't say anything. He just reached over and turned the heater up 2 degrees and pulled the thin wool blanket tighter around his shoulders. He lay awake for a long time after that, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over, wondering if he'd just made the worst mistake of his life, or the best. He didn't fall asleep until the sky started to lighten gray outside the window. The next morning, Ethan dragged himself into the office with dark circles under his eyes and a head full of last night's insanity. He'd barely slept 2 hours. He'd replayed the marriage proposal 100 times, and the handshake, and the way her hand had felt in his cold, and small, and firm. Cole Bennett was propped back in his desk chair, scrolling on his phone with his feet up on the cubicle wall. He looked up when Ethan walked by, a sneer already on his face. "Well, look who it is. The big man himself. Heard VP Locke called you in yesterday. Finally getting that promotion you've been begging for? Don't get too excited. They probably just need someone to blame for the Southside mess when it blows up." Ethan ignored him, dropping his bag at his desk and booting up his computer. Cole had been his rival since day one, slimy, backstabbing, great at kissing up to management. He'd weaseled his way into a team lead position 6 months ago, and ever since, he'd done everything he could to make Ethan's life miserable. He stole ideas, threw Ethan under the bus in meetings, and spent half his day gossiping by the coffee machine. Everyone knew it. Nobody did anything about it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from an unknown number. "Send me the first draft of the Southside Industrial Park project by 10. Only talk ROI and risk hedging. Cut all the vision and community impact fluff. That's for marketing to feed investors. You're an analyst, not a poet. Numbers only." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. It was Lila. That project had been giving him migraines for weeks. He'd rewritten it 3 times, layering in all the vague, optimistic buzzwords management loved, and it still felt mushy and unfocused. He did exactly what she said. He deleted every flowery sentence, stripped the presentation down to hard numbers, rebuilt 3 separate financial models from scratch, and calculated cash flow collapse probabilities down to the decimal point. He cut every single buzzword, every vague promise, every slide that didn't have a number attached to it. It felt brutal. It felt naked. It felt wrong. But it felt honest. He hit send at 10:29, his stomach in knots. He'd never shown anyone a report this bare, this unpolished. He fully expected her to tear it apart again. At 10:35, his phone rang. Not a text. A call. "Your discount rate on page 1 is wrong. Prime rate plus 50%, not 30. On page 3, your sensitivity analysis only accounts for raw material price hikes. You didn't factor in inventory backlog from regulatory tightening. And the land zoning in the appendix? It's industrial, not mixed use. Max FAR is 2.0, not 3.5. Fix all of it. Now." Her voice was crisp, rapid-fire, precise as a scalpel. Exactly the way she'd sounded when she ran the department. It was like no time had passed at all. Cold sweat broke out across Ethan's forehead. He hadn't caught a single one of those mistakes. Not one. He'd stared at the report for hours, and he'd missed all of them. "Now," she continued, before he could stammer out an apology, "go down to accounting and find Roger Hale. Tell him I sent you. Ask him for the original land auction files from last year's Southside parcel. The ones they don't keep on the shared drive. The sealed originals." He hung up, his hands still shaking, and trudged down to the finance department. Roger Hale, everyone called him Big Rog, was the CFO, a gruff, overweight man who never gave anyone the time of day. He hated the project department, and he made sure everyone knew it. Ethan fully expected to be brushed off, maybe even yelled at. He'd only ever spoken to the man twice, and both times Roger had grunted and walked away. But when he knocked on Roger's corner office door and said Lila Voss had sent him, the man's whole demeanor shifted. He paused mid-sip of his black coffee, his small eyes narrowing behind thick glasses. "Lila sent you?" He studied Ethan for a long second, like he was weighing something, like he was trying to figure out what Lila saw in him, then grunted and pulled a sealed manila file out of his locked filing cabinet. "Make copies. Don't mess up the original." And don't tell anyone I gave this to you. Not Locke, not HR, nobody. Got it. Ethan walked back to his desk, clutching the file like it was solid gold. Cole leaned over the cubicle wall, trying to peek, and Ethan turned away, tucking the file under his arm. He could feel Cole's eyes burning into his back the whole rest of the morning. The afternoon review meeting rolled around. VP Locke walked in with a handful of executives, looking bored out of his mind, already checking his watch. Cole went first, his presentation flashy and full of buzzwords: synergy, ecosystem, end-to-end empowerment. Lots of pretty stock photos, very few numbers. VP Locke's eyes glazed over within 5 minutes. Half the room was scrolling on their phones under the table. When it was Ethan's turn, he dove straight into the numbers. He laid out the original land documents from Roger as proof, walked them through every risk point, and presented 2 concrete mitigation plans for regulatory pushback. No fluff. No pretty words. Just facts. The room went dead quiet. VP Locke, who'd been slouching back in his chair, leaned forward, his fingers tapping the table. When Ethan finished, he nodded slowly, a flicker of actual interest on his face. Hayes, this report, this is actually solid. Refreshing. Finally someone around here who talks like a grown-up. Cole's face turned the color of unripe spinach. He stared at Ethan, his mouth open, like he couldn't believe it. Like he couldn't believe the quiet guy who never spoke up had just outdone him by a mile. After the meeting, VP Locke pulled Ethan aside in the hallway, clapping him on the shoulder. Hayes, you're presenting this at the group risk committee next week. Get it polished. This is your shot. Don't waste it. Ethan let out a long breath he didn't know he'd been holding as he walked back to his desk. His hands were still a little shaky. His phone buzzed again in his pocket. One text from Lila. Passable. Don't let it go to your head. There's more work to do. He smiled, just a tiny, private smile, and slipped his phone back into his pocket. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he might actually get somewhere. When Ethan got home that night, he stopped short in the doorway of his tiny apartment. The kitchen light was on, warm and golden, and the air smelled like garlic and soy sauce and ginger. For dishes and a bowl of hot and sour soup were set out on the rickety table, steam curling up toward the ceiling. Lila was standing by the stove in his dorky cartoon apron, the one with pizza slices all over it, a gag gift from his college roommate, dishing white rice into 2 chipped bowls. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and a few strands had fallen loose around her face. Hey, she said, calm as you please, like this was totally normal, like she cooked dinner for him every night. Wash up. Dinner's ready. It's nothing fancy, but it's better than the frozen burritos I saw in your freezer. You can't live on those. He stared at her back, his chest feeling tight and strange. Was this what having a partner felt like? Someone who was there when you got home, who had food ready, who noticed you ate garbage. He'd lived alone for so long he'd forgotten what it was like. He'd dated girls before, sure, but none of them had ever cooked for him. None of them had ever cared enough to notice. Over dinner, he told her about the meeting, about VP Locke picking him for the risk committee presentation. She picked up a piece of braised pork rib and nodded, like she'd expected it all along, like it was the most obvious outcome in the world. Locke's been wanting to fire Cole from that lead spot for months. He just needed an excuse. Someone to prove Cole's all talk. Your report gave him the perfect out. But this is just the start, Ethan. Don't get cocky. Cole will fight back. He doesn't fight fair. He'll go after you behind your back. Why did Roger listen to you? He asked, unable to hold back the question any longer. He never helps anyone. He hates the project department. Everyone says so. He embezzled a construction budget early in his career, right before he made partner, she said, taking a sip of water, like it was no big deal. Almost got caught. I helped him cover it up. Cleaned up the books. Made it all disappear. He owes me. In this industry, Ethan, there are no permanent friends. Only permanent favors and balances. Everybody owes somebody something. You'd better get used to that. Ethan went quiet, poking at his rice with his chopsticks. He'd always thought the people at the top were untouchable, that they played by different rules. Turns out they were all just tangled up in the same giant web, pulling and being pulled, owing each other things. Nobody got there alone. And nobody got there clean. It was a little disillusioning if he was honest. "What about Gideon?" he asked carefully after a minute. "Is he going to come after you? Find out where you are." Her hand stilled on her bowl. A flicker of cold anger crossed her face, gone so fast he almost missed it. "He'll find out I'm staying here tonight. He has people watching. He always does. He pays people to keep tabs on me. Brace yourself. The real show's about to start. He won't stay quiet." The doorbell rang before she finished the sentence. Loud, insistent, aggressive, 3 hard jabs in a row that made the walls rattle. Ethan's heart jumped into his throat. He peered through the peephole. 3 men stood in the dim hallway. The one in front was in an expensive tailored charcoal suit, handsome in a sharp, cruel way, his jaw set tight with rage. Gideon Cross. Behind him were 2 burly bodyguards in black, shoulders like brick walls, faces blank and menacing. Lila shook her head quickly, motioning for him not to open it, her eyes sharp and alert. She didn't look scared. She looked ready. "Lila, I know you're in there." Gideon's voice boomed through the door, thick with rage, loud enough for the whole hallway to hear. "Hiding out with some loser office drone in this dump? Have you no shame? Open up this door right now. We're going to talk about this." Lila's mouth twisted into a cold, bitter smile. She raised her voice, loud and clear, so he could hear every word through the wood. "Mr. Cross, this is my home. You will leave now. Ethan and I are married. If you don't stop harassing us, I'm calling the police. Trespassing and disturbing the peace looks great on a CEO's resume, doesn't it? Shareholders love that kind of press." "Married?" Gideon laughed, sharp and bitter and disbelieving. "Lila, you'd marry some random deadbeat just to get back at me? How pathetic. How low can you sink? You always were dramatic." Something hot and angry snapped in Ethan's chest. He didn't think. He just wrenched the door open, his hands curled into fists at his sides. "Watch your mouth. That's my wife you're talking about. Get off my property. Now." Gideon stared at him, surprised for half a second, then curled his lip in disgust, like he was looking at something he'd stepped in on the sidewalk. "You? Some nobody from the project department? A pencil pusher? Lila, your standards have hit rock bottom. Listen to me, kid." He stepped closer, his voice low and threatening, his eyes cold and dead. "Walk away now. Sign the annulment. Stay out of things that don't concern you. Or you'll regret it. Badly. You'll never work in this city again. I'll make sure of it." The bodyguards took a step forward, looming over him. Ethan could feel his knees shaking. He was outnumbered, outgunned, completely out of his depth. But he stood his ground, planting himself firmly between Lila and the door, his shoulders squared. He might have been scared, but he wasn't going to back down. Not when she was counting on him. "This is a legal residence. If you don't leave right now, I'm calling 911. I'm sure your brand new public company would love the headline, 'CEO breaks into ex-wife's apartment at midnight.' Sound good? Your board of directors would love that headline. I bet the stock price would too." Gideon's face darkened, purple with rage. He glared at Ethan, then at Lila over his shoulder, his nostrils flaring. For a second, Ethan thought he might hit him. "Fine. Fine. You think a little boy toy is going to save you, Lila? I'll ruin you. I'll run both of you out of the city. You'll beg for mercy before I'm done. You'll regret crossing me." He spun on his heel and stormed down the hallway, the bodyguards trailing after him like shadows. The front door of the building slammed hard behind them. Ethan shut the door and leaned back against it, his shirt soaked through with cold sweat. His heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. He'd never been so scared in his life. He'd never stood up to someone like Gideon Cross before. And then Lila stepped up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek to his back. She was warm and solid, and she was shaking a little, too. Just a little. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shirt. "You didn't have to do that. You didn't have to stand up for me." Her warmth seeped through the fabric, and his heart skipped a beat. He froze, his hands hovering in midair, not sure where to put them. He didn't push her away. He didn't want to. Partners look out for each other, he said, trying to sound casual and failing miserably. His voice came out rough and thick. She stayed there for another long minute, her arms around him, her breath warm through his shirt, before she pulled away. When he turned around, her face was already composed again, like the moment of vulnerability had never happened. "We go to City Hall tomorrow," she said, business as usual, like she hadn't just been hugging him. "First thing when they open. No more waiting. We get the license on record before he tries anything else." The next day, they went down to City Hall and got the marriage license. The clerk was a bored older woman who didn't even look up at them, just stamped their paperwork and slid it across the counter. There were giddy young couples in line ahead of them, laughing and holding hands, and an older couple renewing their vows. Ethan felt weirdly out of place, like he was crashing someone else's special day. When the clerk handed them the little embossed marriage certificate, Lila looked at the photo inside and huffed a quiet laugh. "Ethan, you look like you're about to be executed." "Relax. It's just a piece of paper." Nervous, he admitted, shoving his hands in his pockets. "It's a big deal, even if it's fake. First time I've ever been married. Feels weird." "Fake." She raised an eyebrow, tucking the certificate into her leather bag. Her dark hair caught the sunlight coming through the big window. "Legally speaking, it's very real. Nice to meet you, husband." The sunlight was bright and harsh as they stepped outside. Lila didn't head back to his tiny apartment. Instead, she drove them across town to a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood in the old part of the city, streets full of red brick houses and giant oak trees arching over the road. It felt like a different world from the glass towers downtown. Quiet. Slow. Safe. She pushed open a weathered red wooden gate at the end of a cobblestone path, and Ethan's breath caught. A two-story brick house with a small overgrown courtyard stood before them, ivy climbing the walls, a little porch swing hanging from the eave. It was old, a little run down, the paint peeling in places, but beautiful, like something out of a different era. "My grandmother's house," she said, pulling out a set of rusted old keys from her bag. "My dowry, basically. Gideon always thought I sold it years ago to fund the first round of startup capital. He has no idea it's still mine. From today on, we live here. Your apartment was fine, but this is safer. He won't think to look here. It's off all the records he has." Moving in took no time at all. All Ethan's stuff fit into 2 suitcases and a cardboard box of books. He stood in the high-ceilinged living room, sunlight streaming through the big front windows, dust motes dancing in the beams, still half convinced he was dreaming. The floors were hardwood, scuffed and worn, and the walls were lined with built-in bookshelves full of old books. It smelled like wood and old paper and lavender. It felt like home already, even though he'd just walked in. "What are you staring at?" She nodded toward the staircase, a faint smile on her face. "Go pick a bedroom. I'm taking the master. The rest are yours. Just don't go in the west attic. It's full of my grandmother's old junk. Furniture, china, that sort of thing." He chose the smallest one at the end of the hall, the one with a window that looked out over the overgrown backyard. It was bigger than his entire old apartment. He just set his suitcase down on the wooden floor when his phone rang. An unknown number. "Hello. Ethan? Hey, you. Long time no talk." A woman's voice, sweet and sharp at the edges, the way he remembered it. "It's Chloe. Chloe Reed. Remember me?" Ethan's jaw tightened. Chloe Reed. His ex-girlfriend. The one who'd left him 3 days after graduation, standing on the sidewalk outside his tiny apartment with her suitcase, saying he'd never amount to anything, that he was stuck in a dead-end job with no future, and run off with some rich construction supply guy she'd met at a bar. He'd been heartbroken for months. He'd thought they were going to build a life together. She'd had other plans. "What do you want, Chloe?" he said, flat and cold. He had nothing to say to her. Not after what she'd done. "Oh, don't be like that." She laughed, that fake, honeyed laugh he'd once found charming. "I heard you're moving up in the world. Running that big South Side project? My husband Derek's company wants in on the supply contract." Can we meet? Just to talk. Catch up. For old time's sake. He was about to hang up. He had zero interest in catching up. Zero interest in doing her any favors. But then he noticed Lila leaning in the bedroom doorway, one eyebrow raised, a playful little smirk on her face. She gestured for him to put it on speaker, her eyes glinting like she already had a plan. He hit the speaker button. Fine. Tomorrow at 3. Starbucks on 5th Avenue downtown. Tell your husband to come prepared. And don't be late. Chloe gushed her thanks and hung up, her voice bright with relief, like she'd just won the lottery. Lila sauntered into the room, leaning against the doorframe, her arms crossed. Going soft on her already? Gonna give your ex a sweetheart deal to relive the good old days. No, he shook his head firm. He thought about graduation day, about the way she'd looked at him like he was a disappointment, like he wasn't good enough. I just remembered what you said. About paying back the people who walked all over you. About using the leverage you've got. Smart boy. She nodded, approval in her eyes. She walked over and tapped the desk in his room once, lightly. Chloe's husband, Derek? He's a small-time supplier in Gideon's supply chain. Small fish, but he's connected to a dozen other vendors. Squeeze him, and you pry a crack right open in Gideon's whole operation. Tomorrow? Don't be nice. Make them remember who's holding the power now. Make them work for every inch. Ethan showed up at the Starbucks 10 minutes early the next afternoon. He sat in the back corner, laptop open, going over emails, trying to look busy and important. The place smelled like burnt coffee and cinnamon rolls. Chloe walked in a minute later, hanging on the arm of a paunchy, middle-aged man with a shiny bald head and a thick gold watch. His suit was too tight across the stomach. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up with that fake, simpering smile. Ethan, sorry, project manager Hayes. Wow, you look great. Really. Success suits you. I always knew you'd make something of yourself. The man held out a pudgy, sweaty hand. His nails were yellowed. Derek Reed. A real pleasure. Chloe's told me so much about you. All good things, I promise. Real up-and-comer, she says. Ethan didn't stand up. He didn't shake the hand. He just nodded at the chair across from him, his face neutral, bordering on cold. Sit. Where's your proposal? The smile slid off Derek's face, slow and uncomfortable. He sat down anyway, huffing a little, and pulled a fancy-bound booklet out of his briefcase, sliding it across the table with a flourish. Here you go, Project Manager Hayes. We put together a full supply package for the South Side project. Very competitive pricing, top-quality materials, best service in the city. You name it, we've got it. Ethan flipped through 2 pages and closed it, pushing it right back across the table. Hard. Mr. Reed, is this a joke? Your cost estimates are padded 15% above market rate. Your delivery timeline is a full week slower than the industry standard. And your quality guarantee doesn't even have an ISO certification number on it. You bring garbage like this to a meeting with a major developer? Waste of my time. Derek's face turned bright red, purple at the edges. He looked like he was about to pop a blood vessel. Now hold on, Hayes. We're a small business, you can't expect. Small businesses don't belong on multi-million-dollar projects. Ethan cut him off, picking up his coffee and taking a slow sip. He kept his voice steady, even cold, the way he'd heard Lila talk in board meetings. Go back and redo it. From scratch. And next time? Come alone. I don't mix personal history with work. Leave your wife at home. I'm here to do business, not catch up. His gaze flicked to Chloe. She'd gone pale, shrinking back against her husband's shoulder, her eyes starting away. She wouldn't look at him. He could see the humiliation on her face. A smaller part of him felt bad. A bigger part of him felt like she'd earned it. You can't talk to us like that. Derek slammed his fist on the table, making the coffee cups rattle. A few people at nearby tables glanced over. Can't I? Ethan stood up. He was a good 6 inches taller than Derek, and the other man flinched back, like he thought Ethan was going to hit him. You came begging to me, Mr. Reed. Not the other way around. I've got 100 suppliers lined up for this project, all better than you, all cheaper, all faster. You get one shot. 3 days. Same place. If your proposal isn't perfect by then, don't bother coming back. Waste of my time. He grabbed his briefcase and walked out without looking back. Once he was outside on the sidewalk, the cool afternoon air hitting his face, he realized his palms were soaked with sweat. His heart was racing. He'd never talked to anyone like that before. It felt strange. A little wrong. A little thrilling. Like he was finally starting to catch up. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from Lila. Solid performance. B+. They'll come crawling. String them along. Don't cave too fast. Make them earn every concession. Sure enough, over the next 3 days, Derek blew up his phone with calls and texts at all hours of the day and night. He revised the proposal 7 or 8 times, and every time, Ethan picked it apart and sent it back, finding some new flaw, some new error, some new way to push him just a little harder. Chloe even showed up at his office building one morning, crying and begging to talk, and security turned her away at the front desk. Ethan watched from the second-floor window and felt nothing. No triumph. No pity. Just indifference. She'd made her bed. Now she got to lie in it. On the 4th day, Lila told him to agree to another meeting. This time, at a private booth in a fancy downtown steakhouse, Derek's treat. Let him wine and dine you, she'd said, sipping her morning coffee. Let him think he's winning you over. Then you drop the hammer. Derek showed up alone this time, bowing and scraping like a completely different man. No more attitude. No more bluster. He handed over a brand new proposal, thick and detailed, and this one was actually solid. The numbers were fair. The timeline was tight but realistic. The certifications were all there. Ethan read through it carefully, page by page, then nodded slowly. This is acceptable. Barely. But I hear you've been having trouble getting paid by cross-corporation. Gideon's been stringing you along, hasn't he? Dragging his feet on invoices. Derek blinked, then let out a bitter laugh, wiping his forehead with a cloth napkin. Don't get me started. That bastard Gideon Cross drags payments out for months. 90 days, 120 days, sometimes more. I'm this close to a cash flow collapse. I've got payroll to meet. 40 guys depending on me. He's gonna put me out of business. Funny. Ethan set down his fork, dabbing his mouth with a napkin. The steak was excellent, by the way. Way better than anything he usually ate. Our department pays our suppliers faster than anyone in the industry. 30% deposit up front, full payment on delivery and inspection. No net terms. No waiting. Work with us and you never wait for a check again. Sound good? Derek's eyes lit up like he'd just won the lottery. He looked like he was about to cry. Are you serious? Mr. Hayes, you're a lifesaver. Let me buy you a drink. On me. Anything you want. The whole bottle. Whatever. Name it. His hand was shaking as he lifted his glass. Ethan clinked his own glass against it and felt nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just a quiet, hollow sort of indifference. This was just business. That's all. When he walked out of the restaurant, Lila was waiting at the curb in her old sedan. He got in, and she handed him a cold bottle of water. Nicely done. Derek will leak the payment delay news to all the other suppliers. Panic will spread through Gideon's whole supply chain. Everyone will start demanding faster payment. That's step 1. Choke off his cash flow. Make him sweat. What's step 2? He asked, twisting the cap off the water and taking a long drink. She turned to look at him, her eyes dark and steady, the streetlights reflecting in them. Step 2? We crash Gideon's company anniversary gala. It's his big victory lap, his big night in the spotlight, all his investors and board members there. And it's the perfect place to take him down. Publicly. Where everyone can see. The Cross Corp Anniversary Gala was held at the City Convention Center, all crystal chandeliers and champagne fountains, packed with celebrities and investors and socialites in designer gowns. The air smelled like expensive perfume and aged scotch, and roasted hors d'oeuvres passed on silver trays. String music played softly in the background. Ethan walked in on Lila's arm, his rented suit a little too tight across the shoulders, feeling hopelessly out of place. He'd never been anywhere this fancy in his life. He kept worrying he'd spill champagne on someone or use the wrong fork. Lila wore a floor-length deep green velvet gown, simple pearl earrings, her hair pulled back sleek and elegant. She looked like she belonged there, cold and regal, and every head turned as they walked through the door. Whispers followed in their wake. People recognized her. People knew exactly who she was. Gideon was up on the stage giving a speech, all charm and confidence, glowing in the spotlight, talking about vision and growth and the bright future ahead. He painted himself as the genius founder who'd built everything from nothing. The second he saw them, his smile froze on his face, mid-sentence. He wrapped up his speech fast, barely finishing his closing line, and stalked over, drink in hand, with his glossy new wife on his arm. She was young, blonde, perfectly made up, and she looked confused, like she had no idea who Lila was. Lila. His voice was cold, venomous, barely loud enough for them to hear. You've got some nerve showing up here. Bringing your little boy toy to beg for scraps? This is not your party. You're not welcome. Hardly, Mr. Cross. Lila took a slow sip of champagne, her expression perfectly calm, like he was no more than an annoying fly buzzing around her glass. I'm here to celebrate your big night, and to give your shareholders a friendly warning. They deserve to know who they're investing their money with. The full story. Warning about what? He sneered, looking her up and down like she was trash he'd found on his shoe. Warning that you're bitter and crazy and can't let go? About losing their money. Her voice carried, sharp and clear, and the people nearby went quiet, turning to listen. After all, if a CEO will scheme his own wife out of her founding shares and break a prenuptial agreement to do it, what won't he do to your investments? Hardly the mark of a trustworthy leader, if you ask me. You might want to diversify your portfolios before it's too late. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few of the major shareholders frowned, glancing at each other and then at Gideon, their expressions tight. A couple of people pulled out their phones, already texting their brokers. Gideon's face turned thunderous. He leaned in, his voice a snarl so only they could hear. You're dead, Lila. You have no idea what you're starting. You'll regret this. I swear you will. Back off. Ethan stepped forward, putting himself firmly between Lila and Gideon, his shoulders squared. Watch yourself. It's a party. Don't ruin it for everyone. Oh, and congratulations, we just got word. Derek Reed's supply company filed for asset preservation this morning. 3 of your biggest project accounts are frozen. Happy anniversary. Hope you like the gift. Gideon's pupils blew wide. For a second, he looked stunned, like he couldn't believe it. Then he saw red. He grabbed Ethan by the collar, his knuckles white, yanking him close enough that Ethan could smell his expensive cologne and his angry breath. You did this? You little nobody, you think you can take me down? You think you matter. Let go of him. Now. Lila's voice was ice. She pulled out her phone, dialed a number, and hit speaker so everyone around them could hear. Ms. Voss. A calm, deep voice came through the line, a lawyer's voice, steady and professional. The court has issued the full investigation order. We're auditing the full asset transfer trail from Cloud Tech Innovations. And the lawsuit for fraudulent transfer of marital property and securities fraud? It's been filed and accepted. The arrest warrant is in process. The crowd erupted in whispers, loud and shocked. People pulled out their phones to record. Reporters started pushing toward them. Gideon dropped Ethan's collar like he'd been burned. His face was as white as a sheet. He pointed a shaking finger at Lila, his mouth opening and closing like a gasping fish. You planned this all along. You set me up. You've been planning this for months. Ever since you made me sign that fake share transfer agreement from my hospital bed. Lila put her phone away, her eyes like chips of ice. You took everything from me, Gideon. My company. My baby. My life. It's over. Payback's a bitch, isn't it? And then the lights went out. The whole ballroom went dark for 2 heartbeats. Then the giant LED screen at the front of the room flared to life. It wasn't the corporate highlight reel. It was video after video of Gideon with his mistress in hotel rooms, followed by audio recordings of him ordering his CFO to cook the books and hide embezzled funds, clear as day. Names, dates, dollar amounts, bank account numbers. Irrefutable. Undeniable. The crowd gasped. Some people cheered. Most just stared, horrified. The sirens started outside, getting closer and closer, red and blue lights flashing through the big glass windows, painting the walls in streaks of color. Uniformed police officers walked through the ballroom doors, straight toward the stage, straight toward Gideon. Gideon Cross, you're under arrest for embezzlement, money laundering, and securities fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Gideon broke down completely, screaming and thrashing, yelling that it was a setup, that Lila had framed him, that none of it was real. The officers cuffed him and let him out, his face red and screaming, spit flying from his mouth. His new wife had vanished the second the lights went out. No sign of her. She'd taken her jewelry and run. The whole room dissolved into chaos, people talking fast, taking videos, calling their brokers, scrambling for the exits. Lila stood perfectly still in the middle of it all, watching him go. There was no triumph on her face, no smile, no satisfaction. Just bone-deep exhaustion and the quiet release of a breath she'd been holding for years. Like a weight had finally fallen off her shoulders, and she didn't know what to do without it. Like she'd spent so long fighting she'd forgotten what peace felt like. Ethan reached over and took her hand. Her palm was ice cold. She laced her fingers through his, gripping so tight it almost hurt, like she was afraid he'd disappear, too. Like he was the only real thing in the room. "Let's go," she said quietly, her voice a little wobbly. They turned and walked out together, through a sea of shocked, staring faces, and didn't look back. After the scandal, life settled into a strange, quiet rhythm. The city talked about it for weeks, the headlines blaring, the gossip spreading through every office in the financial district. But inside the old brick house, it was calm. Peaceful almost. Like the world outside didn't exist. Gideon was in jail awaiting trial, denied bail. CrossCorp stock tanked, and the company was eventually split up and sold off to competitors. Lila got her shares back, plus a massive settlement, more money than most people made in a lifetime. But she didn't go back to corporate life. She didn't want to. The thought of stepping back into a boardroom made her tired. Instead, she started a small foundation, funding grants and mentorship programs for women starting their own businesses. It was quiet work, but it mattered. It felt real. Ethan thrived at work. 6 months later, he officially took over Cole's team lead position, the youngest in the department. Cole got fired 2 weeks after that, when Ethan found solid proof he'd been taking kickbacks from vendors for years. He walked out of the office with a box of his stuff, red-faced and furious, and Ethan didn't feel bad at all. He'd earned it. They still lived in the old brick house, still slept in separate bedrooms. But the lines between them had blurred, soft at the edges, slow and gradual, so slowly he barely noticed it happening. She'd leave a light on in the front hall when she knew he was working late, and a plate of leftovers wrapped in foil in the fridge. He'd fumble his way through a pot of rice porridge when her stomach acted up, the way his mom used to make it when he was sick, and leave it on her nightstand with a glass of water. They'd eat dinner together every night at the big oak table in the dining room, talking about work, about the foundation, about nothing in particular. It was easy, comfortable, like they'd been doing it forever. Some nights, he'd lie awake in his bed down the hall, thinking about her. Thinking about the way she laughed at his bad jokes, quiet and surprised, like she didn't laugh very often. Thinking about the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating on a report. Thinking about the night Gideon showed up, and she'd hugged him from behind, her cheek pressed to his back. He'd replayed that moment 100 times. He knew it was stupid. He knew it was just a marriage of convenience. But he couldn't help it. He was falling for her. Hard. One night, he was in the study going over project reports late, the lamp casting a warm golden glow over the desk when his phone rang. It was Chloe. Her voice was nothing like it had been before, snotty, crying, desperate, broken. "Ethan, please, you have to help me." "Derek." He gambled away all the money. All of it. The house, the cars, everything. He hit me. He threw me out. I have nowhere to go. No one else will take me. Please. Ethan hung up. He blocked her number. He didn't feel a thing. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang, loud and insistent, through the quiet house. Rain was pouring outside again, just like the night he'd found her. He opened the front door. Chloe was standing there in the rain, holding a beat-up cardboard suitcase, her hair a mess, mascara running down her face in black streaks. When she saw him, she burst into tears, her shoulders heaving. Ethan, I know I messed up. I know I was terrible. I made a mistake. But I have nowhere else to go. Please. Just let me stay for a few days. I'll do anything. I'll cook, I'll clean, whatever you want. He didn't step aside. He just looked at her, cold and steady, no pity in his chest. Chloe, you made your choice when you left. You chose money and status and someone you thought was better than me. You live with the consequences. I'm not your safety net. I never was. You threw that away a long time ago. How can you be so cruel? She shrieked, her voice cracking. What about the 3 years we had together? You said you loved me. You said you'd always be there for me. You sold those 3 years for a bigger house and a fancy watch. He closed the door in her face, slow and firm, cutting off the sound of her crying and the rain. He locked the deadbolt. When he turned around, Lila was standing at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a soft gray cardigan, watching him. The hallway light was warm behind her, gilding the edges of her hair. Taken care of? She asked, quiet. Yeah. He nodded, leaning back against the door. Didn't want to let the mess inside. Not tonight. She walked down the stairs, slow and quiet, barefoot on the wooden floor, and stopped right in front of him. She reached up and straightened his collar, her touch soft and gentle, her fingers brushing his neck. Her skin was warm. You've grown up so much, Ethan. Do you know that? That quiet kid from the cubicle, he's gone. Something shifted in that moment. The distance between them vanished. The line between partner and something more blurred until it was gone completely. He looked into her eyes, warm and dark, and something inside him fell apart. He realized he'd gotten used to her. Used to her sharp advice, used to her quiet presence in the house, used to the rare, soft smiles she gave him when she thought he wasn't looking. He realized he didn't want her to leave. He didn't want the deal to end. He wanted more. He wanted all of it. Lila, he said, his voice thick, like his throat was tight with something he couldn't name. Our deal, it's expired, right? 3 months was up weeks ago. The case is won. Gideon's gone. The house is safe. Her hand stilled on his collar. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable, her eyes dark and deep. It is. According to the agreement, we should file for divorce. Clean break, like we said. No strings. I don't want a divorce. He took her hand, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst out of his chest. He was scared. Scared she'd say no. Scared he'd ruined everything. Scared she'd think he was taking advantage. But he had to say it. He couldn't keep it in anymore. I don't want fake anymore. I want real. Can we have real, Lila? Can we try? For real this time. She froze, her eyes going wide. For a long, terrible second, he thought she'd say no. Thought she'd pull her hand away. Thought he'd messed up the best thing that had ever happened to him. Then she looked down, her other hand covering his, and she sighed, soft and shaky. Ethan, are you sure? Being with me isn't easy. I'm difficult. I'm controlling. I come with so much baggage. So much mess. So much history. You deserve someone simpler. Someone who doesn't bring a lawsuit and an ex-husband in prison to the relationship. I'm sure. He cut her off, gentle but firm. He cupped her face in his hands, tilting it up so she had to look at him. You yell at my reports? I'll fix them. Your stomach hurts? I'll make porridge. You've got baggage? We'll unpack it together. One piece at a time. This isn't a business deal, Lila. This is us. I want to build a life with you. I want all of it. The good and the bad. The easy and the hard. I want you. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears, but she was smiling. A small, wobbly, beautiful smile. Ethan Hayes. You quiet, stubborn man. When did you get so good with words? It's easy, he said, pulling her closer, his breath catching in his throat. When I mean them. I love you. I think I've loved you since that night you cried into your soup on my couch. Maybe even before that. I just didn't know it yet. She laughed then, a soft, wet laugh, like ice melting in spring after a long, cold winter. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, soft and sweet, her hands on his chest. Her lips were warm and a little salty from tears. It was better than he'd imagined. Better than anything. Okay, she whispered when they pulled apart. She rested her forehead against his, her hands tangled in the back of his shirt. But this time, no take-backs, no contracts, no conditions. Just us. Never, he said, and kissed her again. They never had a big fancy wedding. Just a small dinner in the backyard of the old house, with a handful of close friends, string lights hung between the oak trees, and a table full of food Lila had cooked herself. Lila wore a simple white cotton dress, no makeup, her hair loose, with a few daisies tucked behind one ear. Ethan wore the first properly fitting suit she'd ever bought him, and he still felt a little awkward in it, like he was playing dress-up. At dinner, after everyone had eaten, she held his hand under the table and looked out at the people they loved, the fire pit glowing warm on her face. I used to think my career was my armor, she said, quiet enough only he could hear. That if I was tough enough, smart enough, I'd never get hurt. Turns out, the warm weight of someone you love is the only home that matters. He looked at her, and his chest felt so full he could barely breathe. He squeezed her hand. There was nothing else to say. A year later, their daughter was born, small and pink and perfect, with Lila's dark eyes and his stubborn little chin. Lila decided to stay home with her, hiring a professional director to run the foundation day to day. She was brilliant at it, brighter than she'd ever been in any boardroom. She sang silly off-key songs while she changed diapers, haggled over pennies at the farmer's market like a pro, and always left a warm light on in the kitchen for when he came home late. Ethan got promoted to project director. His salary more than doubled. But they never moved out of the old brick house. They fixed up the backyard, painted the kitchen soft yellow, and Lila planted roses all along the fence line. Every summer, they bloomed in wild, brilliant colors, pink and red and yellow and cream, and the whole yard smelled like them. On their daughter's first birthday, they took photos out in the yard with a cheap disposable camera from the drugstore. Lila held the baby, who was covered in chocolate cake frosting from head to toe, and Ethan put his arm around her shoulders. Sunlight filtered through the big oak tree, dappling her face with gold. "Ethan," she said softly, out of nowhere, quiet, like she was sharing a secret just for him. "You know that night? Outside the convenience store? So many cars drove by. Nice cars. Expensive cars. But you were the only one who stopped. Guess I was your destiny," then, he joked, kissing her forehead soft. The baby grabbed a handful of his hair and tugged, hard, and he laughed. No, she shook her head, her eyes soft and warm, full of love, full of everything. She looked at him like he was the best thing that had ever happened to her. Like he was home. "You were my way home." The wind stirred through the rose bushes, sweet-scented and soft, carrying the sound of their daughter's giggles across the yard. Ethan held his girls a little tighter, the sun warm on his face, the roses blooming all around them. He knew their story was just beginning. And whatever came next, good or bad, easy or hard, they'd face it together. Hand in hand. All the way home.